When we try to run code from the VB window, let's say we want to run the double me code. Notice when I choose that, it puts the insertion point inside that sub-procedure. So if I click the run button, it's going to run that procedure for me. But if I click the run button and my cursor is not within a sub-procedure, then it says, I don't know what you want to run, so go ahead and run one of these, and I guess I could do the call sub from elsewhere, or let's do the double me and run it, and then it runs it. But it might not run the way we think it should. So in order to run a particular sub, make sure that the insertion point is within that sub procedure. On page 25, we can also call this procedure from another project, but we're not going to do that. Just know that it can be done, and it tells how to do that. Notice the caution on page 26. Analogy, project is to procedure as folder is to file. In other words, in Windows, you can't have the same file name of the same file type in the same folder, but you can have that in different folders. And the computer does not get mixed up because it keeps track of the path. And it says, here's folder A with this file in it, and here's folder B with this file in it. Just like an address of 123 doesn't confuse anybody if there's a 123 Broadway and a 123 Main Street. We go to the street first, then we go to the number. So the same thing is true here. If I want to call a procedure from another project, then I have to precede it with the project name, project.procedure name. So that's the analogy, and that's the only thing you have to do differently. By the way, let's verify that you don't need the word call. I'm going to go here and take out the word call. And if I run double me, it calls it, runs it, gives my last thing. So the word call is optional, but it's very, very strongly suggested to put the word call in there because that draws our attention to the fact that we are calling something from somewhere else. I've done this before, and I've seen code where they didn't use the word call, and I would see something and I wouldn't recognize it, and then it would dawn on me, oh, that must be a procedure from somewhere, and they didn't use the word call. Visual Basic is what we call a loose language as opposed to highly structured. That's good in that we can quickly slap together code that works. We can also shoot ourselves in the foot more easily. There's a good example. You can use the word call or not use the word call. Most other languages, you would have to use the word call or it would give you a compile error. Another thing about Visual Basic is ampersand joins strings of text. Plus sign adds numeric values. A structured language, a highly structured language, would not let you use one for the other. Visual Basic, if it's numeric values, it'll add them with a plus sign. If it's strings, it'll concatenate them with the plus sign. Again, that's kind of dangerous because you don't know what you might get and what it might do with it. So we are going to teach the kind of best practices way to go about it. Always use ampersands to join strings exclusively. Always use plus signs to add numeric values exclusively. On page 26, we talked about IntelliSense, when things pop up and automatically pick it. They have a lot of ways that you can pick the thing from IntelliSense. My favorite thing is whenever it's on the thing that you want, just type the next character that you would want after that. Let's do an example of that. Application dot, and we'll talk about that later, but if I type something and then hit a dot, it tells me all the things that could come after that. I want to do the application's formula bar height. I type FO. Once it hits formula bar height, I'm just going to type an equal sign. And it auto-completes that, puts the equal sign. And if I wanted to assign a number to the formula bar height, I have no idea if this is in points or pixels or whatever. Let's look at what Excel looks like right now. There's ordinary formula bar height. And now, I don't know if this will work or not. I've never tried this. I'll try 24, and I don't know what units that's in. I just want to run this one line of code. If we go to the View menu, Immediate Window, that's Control G. It normally shows up at the bottom of your code window, but you can move it around. I'm going to put that code in there, and I have to actually go to the end of the line and then press Enter to execute a line of code in the immediate window. And I'm going to see when I press Enter, it says application defined or object defined error. Okay, it doesn't like that code. Well, let me try it just typing it in the immediate window. Application dot formula bar height equals, I'll put 15 and hit Enter. Ah, that did it. That's interesting. I have no idea why it didn't work earlier. I wonder what the height was.
Take a 1.
Shall we try it on a 1? Yeah, 1.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, so 1 is kind of the normal height. And that's the immediate window. Immediate window, which is Control G, allows you to execute a single line of code outside any sub. Let's look at page 30. Let's say I've got a bunch of code and I think I don't need it. Comment / uncomment block. These commands appear on the Edit toolbar. As you normally do in most Windows programs, if you right-click on any toolbar, choose to show the Edit toolbar. So if we go to our window here and just right-click anywhere, notice there's an Edit toolbar. It pops up as a floating toolbar, but we can dock it up with the other stuff. You can also put any buttons you want on a particular toolbar. Since nothing's selected, it's grayed out, but let's do this. Let's go to our double my num function, and now because I'm in a sub procedure, does everybody see to the right of this little hand there's something that says comment block, and then to the right of that it's got an undo arrow. It says uncomment block. Let's say in our double me sub this code wasn't working, or we thought I don't need that code. Rather than delete it and find out later that we did need that code, we can simply select all of it and click on that comment block, and it puts an apostrophe at the beginning of every selected line. So now all of that stuff is commented out, but it still exists there if we need it later. So if later we decide, ooh, I did need that code, I just select all of it, say uncomment. It takes out the apostrophe that it inserted, leaving what used to be a comment still a comment, and what used to be an executable line of code, an executable line of code. Have you all put buttons on different toolbars before? It's been around since Office 95, but it wasn't very well known, and that's why in 07 they went to the quick access toolbar to make it obvious that you can put stuff on there. But you can do that for any program, and you can do that in the VBA editor. We won't get into that right now, but if somebody wants to play with that, you can, and we'll answer any questions about that. Let's look at 31 and 32, which is basically modules and modifying them. When we look at modules, notice we are in this particular file, VBA in class, and it says we're looking at the code that's in Module 1, and this module is right here. Typically, when you start writing code, you don't want to leave your module named Module 1. Now, this VBA editor works a little bit differently from Windows in that normally you would think you could right-click on that, or you could press F2 and it would go into the rename mode. Not so. We have to go down to the Properties window, and the only thing that has properties up here that we can modify is Module 1, and right down here is its name. So we can just name this. Typically people either name it MDL, and then I'm going to put VBA class. You can use underscores, but you can't use spaces. So you can name your modules anything you want, and you can also export these modules. So let's look at doing that, because typically you may find yourself writing little chunks of code on different machines or whatever. You can export this module. So let's right click up here in the Project Explorer window, right click on the module, and let's say export file. And when we export the file, notice it is saving it as a basic file which has a .bas extension. It's just a text file. We could call it text and it doesn't matter, but this recognizes .bas files instantly and pulls them in. So I'm going to save that on my desktop so I can get to it more easily. I'll just leave it called that. And now, if I go to the desktop, there should be something there called VBA, whatever I called it, .bas. Notice it's got a blank icon because it doesn't associate BAS with any particular file. But of course, I could right-click it and say open. Okay, I'm going to select a program from installed programs. Any text editor will work, Notepad or Word or whatever. But you can see if you open it with Notepad, this is just a text file. So you can save these, you can combine them into one big file so that all your code is in one place. I have several different files. One is all my Word code, one is all my Excel code, one is all my Outlook code, so that when somebody asks me if I can help them with something, if I've done it before, I can just grab it and maybe tweak a thing or two and not have to go from scratch. Now, once we have this, we can import this into VBA on any other project. I'm going to do a dangerous thing now. I am going to right-click this and say remove this module. That's how you delete it. And it always asks you, would you like to export it before you remove it, just in case you really didn't want to remove it, but I've already done that. Don't export it. Now it is gone. All my code is gone, but it is on the desktop. I can't undo that deletion. But I can say, let's import something. All right, import a file. Or I can just drag and drop it. So let's try that. Here's my file. I can just drag this and drop it into the Project Explorer window, and now it's back again, and there's all my code. So you can import, export, drag and drop, copy and paste, that sort of thing. And it's just a text file. But obviously when you open it in something other than the VBA editor, it doesn't have the nice colors. Questions about importing, exporting, removing, renaming? That pretty well covered 30 to 32. And let's look at page 33 before we take a little break. At the end of each chapter, he's got the absolute minimum. He says about 2/3 of the way down, I'd like to impress upon you the advantages to taking a neat, orderly approach to your programming. Even though the compiler doesn't care how it looks, it really is important when we look at code to help us understand it more. He says two things. Don't skimp on comments. When in doubt, put a comment, because I guarantee at some point you're going to come back to this and you'll wish you had commented it so you knew what you had written rather than have to look at it 3 months later and say, now what was I doing there? I know it worked and I know it was good, but I can't remember why. And you'll have to figure it out from scratch. The second thing is the indenting. We haven't done much where we see the advantages of indenting, but when we start doing if-then statements and looping, we want to be able to quickly identify chunks of code. By indenting everything except the sub and the end sub, that lets us see really easily where each sub ends and begins. Let's just put that in the notes. Page 33, tips. Use comments liberally and indent properly. So we want to use lots of comments and to indent.